Hey, what's up? This is Louie Vega from Masters at Work, New Eureka Soul and Elements of Life representing Vega Records. You're listening to my man Reelax on release.
The number you have reached has been disconnected. The new number is...
The phone booth.
Here we go. It's a great pleasure to welcome on the show for the first time, and well, a long awaited time for this man right here. Anyway, I am talking to the one and only, one of the godfathers of house music, it'd be fair to say, Mr. Louie Vega. I don't know if I'm meant to say Little Louie Vega anymore, but it is Louie Vega on the show. How are you, sir?
Oh, Louie Vega's fine. How are you, man? I'm good.
Good. It's great to have you on here. As I said, being a house music follower for many years, to finally get to talk to you, one of the masters right now. How and why are you getting to this position in time right now? Of course, I mentioned masters. You are one half, famously, of the Masters at Work with the legend, also Kenny Dope Gonzalez. And you have gone on to do many things on your own right, including taking out the Grammy for your fantastic remix. Was it now Curtis Mayfield's Superfly, which is a fantastic record to be reworking, but taking out a Grammy as well. I mean, the list goes on how many things you've done, and we'll cover a lot of them. Louie, your career's been going for some time. You've taken, I guess, a bit of hiatus, and now you're back in 2014 in full flavor and full force. It feels. What was sort of the catalyst to really get the music steam rolling again? It seems to be some sort of reinvigoration. Was there anything that was a catalyst for that?
Well, I took the last 10 years to kind of build my catalog on Vega Records, and I started a band called Elements of Life. And when I created that project, I needed an outlet for it, which hence, the reason why I created Vega Records, so that I could put out all these records. Then all my friends around me started to ask, they wanted to put out music, and they started sending me music. So I started signing artists. Then I started signing the artists that were on in the bands, the lead singers and everything. So, it kind of grew into its own thing. And now it's 150 singles later, 10 albums later. So it's really, I was definitely creating a lot of music and building a foundation around the world. I was, I travel, I do a lot of shows, and, I've built an audience that, has been very loyal to me and has been following, where I've been playing around the world and following the music. So it kind of went underground, but it was kind of cool because I was able to create my, let's say, own island of music, all these years. So I'm pretty excited now. Everything's been the last, I've been putting albums out with the band, Elements of Life albums. There are 3 that I put out, and we've toured the world, and, that I went into kind of like another world of doing live performances with the band and conducting my actual whole band. So, it just kind of broke me out into outside of the dance scene and more into like the jazz world and world scene and Latin scenes and electronic festivals, all these different places that we had traveled and stuff. So, between those projects and all the artists that I had signed, it just kind of created a whole new world for Vega Records. So I was, we're busy working on all that stuff all these years.
Absolutely. I mean, as I said, you aren't one to rest or take much time off, but as you said, your music always has been global and world music, I guess, in there, everything from salsa, Afrobeat, jazz, hip-hop, soul, and as we know, famously, house electronica as well. And it seems you've been really exploring, as you said, these world sounds at the moment, taking people back, I guess, and we're talking way back to the 80s. You were one of the residencies at Studio 54. You're really sort of one of the first ones in there remixing and getting in there and creating what was a new sound at that time, right? It was sort of this house experience, if you will. And I'd be curious to know, for those getting into the scene now, or just finding understanding as dance music goes global, I should say, it's getting bigger and bigger, of course, every year. But back then, in the early days, such a simple thing we find nowadays to remix would have been such a different process for people such as yourself. Like, it would be a lot of people involved, the full studio production. Could you maybe take us through what sort of a Louie Vega or Masterwork remix sort of process would have been back then in the early days?
Oh, goodness. Well, the Masters at Work started in the early 90s. So, before that, I had already started making records in 86, let's say. Yeah. And, there were remixes before me, you know what I mean? So, the first remix was created, in the mid-70s? Yeah. I believe it was 10% by Double Exposure on South Soul Records, and that's the first 12-inch. So, I would say that's when they first started making long versions of records and giving a lot of DJs the opportunity to lend their talent on how they heard records arranged and played and mixed and sounds brought up and EQ'd in a different way so that it could have a more a better effect in clubs and everything. So, I came from that school of learning from them. I learned from DJs like Larry Levan and watching my older sisters going to David Mancuso's places and at the Loft and, bringing and talking about the music they experienced there and showing me that type of music. It was an underground sound. That whole thing just was a big part of my life, and and also, being there at the beginning of hip hop. You know, I mean, I was there before it was hip hop, and when they were just playing breakbeats, and it was Africa Bambaataa, Jazzy J, Red Alert, Africa Islam, playing in the projects with all the break dances and everything, and at that time, the first DJ who took me under his wing was Jazzy J. It was actually a hip hop DJ, one of the hip hop pioneers and legends, that was there at the very beginning. So, I was lucky, man. I was lucky to grow up in such a wonderful city with a melting pot of people and a melting pot of sound,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more to it, people out there, than just luck, but I mean, certainly being in the right place at the right time, but obviously your talent is testament to the length of your career. We are talking to Louie Vega right now on the show. Lots been going on with the man Louie, as we're finding out as we take back from the early days as Masters at Work. I guess one that you probably asked many times, but for the listener out there, how did you and Kenny come together? Was that a planned thing, someone you both admired each other, or as one of those random occurrences in, as you say, such a melting pot that is New York City? Well,
I mean, back to, because I was trying to get to the, and I didn't get to it fast enough, sorry. The process in making records, I think growing up in New York and experiencing all those sounds and all that great music, and my record collection, it was a big part of me learning how, records were arranged and made, you know what I mean? So, when I got into the studio, it was a very long process, first of all, but in mid-'80s to the end, unless you were producing a record from scratch, you were starting it from scratch, but when you were mixing records in the beginning, you weren't really overdubbing as much. You were kind of working on arrangements of songs and bringing out sounds and EQing sounds differently to give it a better sounding mix for the clubs, and
gotcha.
That's how it kind of started. And then, of course, we would create tracks from scratch, but then there was also times when we started taking just the vocal of a song and creating brand new music underneath it, and even stretching the song. When I would say stretch the song, we would take maybe a song that was at a slow tempo. It could have been 108 or 110, and we would stretch it all the way up to like 120 or 122, and
which is what you find happening more often these days when people think of a remix, right? But back then that was probably a rarer thing because it was less people would be able to do it.
The process was so difficult, to do. I mean, it took time. It took hours and hours and days sometimes to just do one record. So I was already making records between 86 and 90, and I was doing a style of music called Latin hip hop and freestyle, and it was the music was played in a lot of clubs. I used to play in the clubs, but I used to play on the radio too. But at the same time that I was playing Latin hip hop and freestyle, I was playing house music, I was playing disco, I was playing hip hop, I was playing reggae. But I had like a way of playing this open format of music at that time. But house music was always, a big part of it as well from the beginning. I was there since the first few records started coming out. Hearing the beginnings of Larry Heard and Marshall Jefferson and Mr. Fingers, Robert Owens, all the early Steve So Curly, all the early Farley Jackmaster Funk house legends. So they were the part of the creation of the sound coming from Chicago. And then in New York, you had, Larry Levan making music, Boy Jarvis, and Timmy Regisford, and countless other, Blaze making records, at that time we were influenced by the whole sound, and Todd Terry was this young guy. He used to come to my clubs and bring me, he brought a cassette, and he said, look, I made this new music. I want to know if you could play it. I said, well, listen, I don't play cassette. You know what I mean? You got to put it on a reel-to-reel, because in those days I used to play a reel-to-reel with a pitch control, and I used to mix it in like if I was mixing a turn, like I was playing on a 1200 technique turntable, So he brought it to me the following week, and next thing you know, I was playing all his records. I mean, very early to 2,500, 3,000 people a week every Friday and Saturday, and his music just blew up big, like because I was playing it like 6 to 9 months before it came out.
Sure, wow.
So from that, it kind of led into going into the whole, the house thing was just blowing up so much bigger. You know what I mean? It was huge, even with Chicago and the sound of Chicago and New York and Detroit. But when Todd Terry started sampling from the early 80s records, electro and disco and all that, and combining it with the house beats and the house sounds and the sound of Chicago and the sound of New York, it really took it to a whole new level when it came into England. When it went to the UK. So it was all all this was happening at the same time. Next thing you know, there was a song that I heard Kenny Dope do called "A Touch of Salsa," and when I heard that track, I said, I really liked it because it had a lot to do with my roots. There was a sample of Celia Cruz, who was like she's the queen of salsa, and then you had another sample from Sylvester from the disco days. So he combined those two and made this really cool groove out of it, and I wanted to remix it. So I asked Todd Terry, he introduced me to Kenny and stuff. And once I met Kenny, we got together, and we just went to each other's. We had little studios. It wasn't even studios. It was like a drum machine and a keyboard. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that was it. That was kind of our studios with a record collection and DJ setup inside of it.
Wow, and two masters at it. We are talking.
Yeah, so that's how I met Kenny, and then we just hit it off. And at that time, I had an album deal. I was doing an album deal for Atlantic Records, so I was signed pretty early in my life to do a whole album deal with Atlantic Records. And first thing I did was grab some of the singers from the clubs that the clubs I played at the time, the kids that hung out. And Mark Anthony was one of them. Mark Anthony, who is a huge salsa pop star now, he was the singer that I brought in to work and partner up with me on the Atlantic Records deal. And then I told Kenny to come into the studio. I said, why don't you just make beats? Just make some beats and let's try to do some things together. And when he came in, we spent about 2 or 3 months in the studio, and that's how we got acquainted to just working with each other, and it was just so natural. So from there, I just said, well, let's start a production company together. I think we should start something together as a team.
Yeah. Tell me, did you come up with the name?
House music now, it's something different, and I'm playing a lot of. I played keyboards too because I played piano as a kid. Yep. So a lot of the first 6 years of Masters at Work, I played keyboards and Kenny did the beats, and that's how we started doing it in the studio when we got acquainted. And next thing you know, I was still getting remixes, but from all the pop groups that I was doing in the 86 to 90. You know what I mean? So pop groups like Debbie Gibson, who she was like a Britney Spears of the time.
Totally.
So Saint Etienne, Warner Brothers, Wolfgang. Oh goodness, what were they called? Wolfgang Press, something like that. Chic, all these different groups and stuff. I was still getting a lot of remixes from Warner Brothers and Atlantic because I used to work with them a lot. So I said, Kenny, let's take these B-sides of this record and let's kind of create this. Let's put the new sound that we got.
Yeah.
We created a new sound in the studio, and we started coming up with all these grooves. So we started putting the grooves within the remixes and taking a little hook. Let's say, we would take a little hook of a vocal, or it could have been a chorus or just a piece of it.
Something that stood out to you, yeah?
We would chop them up, something that stood out and that was hooky. So we started putting those on the B-sides of records, and it says, and then we started thinking about it. We got to call this company something. We got to call this production company. Kenny's like, well, I got this crew name that I use when I used to go to parties in Brooklyn. It's called Masters at Work. I said, that's perfect. Let's use it. He goes, I lent it to Todd, and he put it on 2 songs, but we could take it back. That's what he said. I said, all right, cool, let's do it. So we called it Masters at Work, and they said, let's call it Masters at Work dubs and put them on the B-sides of these records. And 6 months later, it's like everybody from Madonna to you name it, Jamiroquai, everybody, all the labels wanted to hire us to do Masters at Work dubs, and that's how it started.
They were huge worldwide, as you said, from taking it back to the UK, taking the house sound back to the UK, and you guys remember Michael Jackson, Luther Vandross, Madonna, Jamiroquai, Tito Puentes, everyone wanted the Masters at Work sound, and you went on to put that touch and tirelessly to each and every one, that consistent Masters at Work sound. We then, I guess, flash forward, you guys, it's inevitable, so much time spent together, go off and do your own things, and as we touched on, you've gone off to do your own label as well as design stuff. You've done some your own design memorabilia as well in the meantime. But now in 2014, Masters at Work are coming back together, and one of the labels that I guess for the house side of things that really sort of had a home for you guys was Defected Records, and some of your biggest releases, and ultimate classics to this day, To Be in Love, I Can't Get No Sleep, all this sort of stuff. You guys reinventing this stuff? Talk us through the reunion of Masters at Work.
Well, the thing is that you got to realize we made records from, let's say, mid-1990. It was halfway through, and all the way to 2000. So we did about 10 years of making music solidly, working 16, 18 hours a day. We were working so hard and making a lot of great music, and we recorded over 1,500 recordings in that period of time. And when we did that, we made a huge impact in the scene of dance music, and even people beyond dance, the dance scene were recognizing what we were doing. So, we took it as far as making a few Masters at Work albums. I think we made 2, and then we made one, a Nuyorican Soul album. And then we had all these different aliases we used, from Hard Drive to Buckethead heads too. I mean, we just came up with all kinds of names, and
So just keep you
we
guys
never
interested.
wanted to sign ourselves to these labels, and we all had so many different styles of sounds and grooves and vibes that either some were vocally, some could have been more minimal, some could have been more, more street, real raw and dirty. So, we were coming up with all these different names to kind of give a name to the sound, let's say, so people could know, that hard drive sound, or this sound, or that sound. We did so many records, and then we said, let's do things individually, and that's when I really wanted to start a band and do the Elements of Life thing, and after New York and Soul, which that inspired me to do that, because I was dreaming for that, and then I started Vega Records, and then Kenny wanted to do Dope Wax with all the rare grooves, and then the things that he was coming with, KD Records, and putting out all these obscure records and stuff, and still doing, of course, his interpretation of dance music, and I did my interpretation of dance music, as well as doing the band and the rare groove thing that we were both doing. And we took a full 10 years practically to do that, and we got together here and there from 2001 to 2011. Around there, we did these little things here and there, but it wasn't until 2 or 3 years ago that we started saying, okay, well, let's start coming out again, come back together, because the fans just really wanted us to do stuff together. They wanted to hear that again. That's how hard that impact was from those 10 years of making that music. So once we did that, we said, okay, let's do a tour. Let's start touring, but doing just special events. And we would do things like Rock in Rio. It would be Masters at Work, and also on the bill was like Stevie Wonder and Jamiroquai. And then we would do all these different type of festivals, and Carl Cox's birthday in Ibiza. So Luciano's night at Ushuaia. So what we started doing was things that people wouldn't expect, and us doing collaborations with artists like that and DJs like that with their nights, and it really kind of set the tone that, wow, Masters at Work are starting to be out here and do some stuff together. It's cool. So then we've been talking the last maybe 2 years or something with Defected, with Simon Dunmore, and we know Simon Dunmore for a very long time. We every label that he was on, we always gave him a record. I mean, when he was on A&M Records, we gave him I Can't Get No Sleep. When he was on Cool Tempo, we gave him Love and Happiness. River Ocean, when he was on, when he started Defected Records, we gave him To Be in Love. You know what I mean?
Three massive records right there, can I just say?
And then we started picking up a lot of our music, our stuff was with Strictly, because I had made a lot of records on Strictly Rhythm, so did Kenny. So we probably made about 30, 40 records each on Strictly Rhythm with our aliases and our solo projects and stuff, so and a couple of things together too. So we but never as Masters at Work, but with all these other aliases, which were like Bass Tone, Hard Drive, Untouchables, like all these crazy group names and stuff. So Simon had picked up a lot of that music because he was doing a collaboration with Strictly Rhythm, and he started putting out a lot of our music that we had on Strictly Rhythm. So they kind of had a whole resurgence again. So the crowd was always looking for us and looking for music. So that kind of sparked some things up, and then he Simon came back and said, hey, we had done a couple of mixed projects for them. He said, I want to do a Masters at Work, like an anthology. I said, oh, cool. I said, he goes, well, I'm going to do like 4 CDs. We want to do 40 songs. We want you guys to pick the songs. And for us, our image is very important, and the way we're portrayed out there. So, we had control of everything, and just knowing how we wanted it to be and look, and they would come up with some wonderful ideas, and we collaborated on it. It was a great collaboration, and we finally finished it it came out in September, like a few months ago, 2 months ago. And, we just did a few things. We did a Boiler Room together as Masters at Work. We did 2 separate solo sets. We did I played an hour, Kenny played an hour, then we did 1 hour of Masters at Work. And then we did a Resident Advisor, just really in-depth interview, I think on a show, on a program called Exchange or something like that. And then, just a few other things and some visual things. And then, just talking in front of videos and just, talking about our work and everything. And, I guess, it was a right time. And I think, for us, it was important because we have been hearing the last, 5-6 years that, 4 or 5 years, I'd say, and especially now, even it's really stronger now that a lot of the kids of this generation today have been playing our music. You know what I mean? And playing our music to them. And we started meeting them going around when you're in Ibiza and all these places, and we're playing in places, they're really excited to meet us and saying that our music are like classics to them.
Absolutely.
Like the way, and so I'm looking at it like, oh wow, in the 90s, we used to love we still do, of course, but in the 90s we were influenced by 80s and 70s music, you know what I mean? Early 80s and 70s. And, so you got to figure now in, 2014, 2010, around there until now, the kids are influenced by the 90s music, and we were right in the middle of it.
You were it. You were exactly. I remember I first saw the Disclosure guys playing their first live sets down in Australia, and they're ripping out some of those 90 garage grooves and stuff like that. And I'm like, wow, okay, this is it. They're now looking back, as you said, back to those sounds, which are the classics for them, And as I mentioned, you both Kenny and yourself are responsible for some of the all-time classics, if not the classic, for the house music generation. And it seems only right, and it's a testament also to Simon Dunmore, I guess, and Defected, that for you guys to re-release this anthology at this time, or release this anthology at this time, is because house music is back, it seems, and it's stronger than ever across the globe. It sort of went off for a while, but now it's come back, and to have you both back in full effect is fantastic. It's perfect timing, and it's like you never went away, and we're really great to have you back. We are talking to Louie Vega right now on the show. I've got to ask this, with so much music flying around, and you've been across so much music from all that time, let alone the numbers you reeled off about how much you've made, Louie, but are you still keeping up with new artists? Are there any new artists that are capturing your ears these days? Are you sort of across?
Yes, of course. I've even done a couple of collaborations. Got together with Soul Clap, and we put out some music together. I did something for them, a mix for one of their singles out now called Misty, where they feature Robert Owens. So it's Soul Clap featuring Robert Owens, and the song's called Misty. Also, one of their new artists in their camp is named Nick Monaco. He's fairly new the last couple of years, and then he's from San Francisco, and I signed one of his records called Sample Your Soul, and I did some remixes for it as well, and he did some mixes. So, I really like what the boys are doing, the Love Crew, Wolf and Lamb, all those guys, and then up in Brooklyn, and, we've been going to each other's spots and checking each other out and having fun together. It's been cool, and we're talking about doing some more. So, of course, you have our boys, the Martinez brothers, who, they're our boys from the Bronx, come from the same place, so I'm really proud of them. Of course, you got, goodness, Seth Troxler. I mean, you got the whole crew out there, Maceo, so, I mean, I would say I'm really excited. It's a good time now because there's a lot of young talent out there, and, they're coming from different countries, different places, and they're giving you their interpretation of dance, but the cool thing is that now more than ever, it's connecting with our sound and just the whole deep house sound, because obviously we called it underground deep house in the 90s. They're calling it deep house today. So I think it's wonderful that it's all, connecting more and created like this, it's cycled around.
Bringing the family back together, getting the family back together.
And I think that's what it's about. It's about collaborating with the youth of today, and then, they're influenced by our sound, and then us coming together. Of course, we get influenced by listening to some of the things they do as well. So, it just works, hand in hand.
Brilliant. We have been talking to Louie Vega. It's been amazing. We could talk, I reckon, for a month or more, Louie. It's fantastic. We do thank you for taking the time out.
Hey, what's up? This is Louie Vega from Masters at Work, New Eurekan Soul and Elements of Life, representing Vega Records. You're listening to my man Reelax on release.